Hey, this is C&D channel. I'm Chris. This is MMA for you. I'm going to be doing my post-fight analysis for the final Strikeforce card, Strikeforce Marquardt versus Saffiedine. And after I talk about the card, I'll probably also just talk about Strikeforce in general as well. I like this card actually. As far as picks go, I missed two, even though I thought KJ Nunes got robbed against Ryan Couture. Dave got Tarek Saffiedine right against Nate Marquardt. Kind of called it too with the takedown defense and better technical striking. Card overall, despite the mismatches, fun card. Didn't see too many. A lot of good submission finishes too. Over here. A couple stories here. I mean, you got to see, Jacare beat Ed Herman, and he kind of dominated him. And it's kind of like you get this idea of how he'd do in the UFC. And you got Tarek Saffiedine, man, that guy just, wow, really impressive win over a UFC veteran and Nate Marquardt and a perennial top 10 fighter, Daniel Cormier's definitely going to, he's going to UFC, calls out Frank Mir. Hopefully Josh Barnett goes there. Hopefully Gegard Mousasi. Mike Kyle said that this is his last one, so he said he retired. So overall, it's a really entertaining card, in my opinion. I didn't think there was any fight that I'd consider a snoozer. Even fights I thought would be snoozers. Like, I thought the Pat Healy fight would be a snoozer. And the Tim Kennedy fight, actually. And turned out to be, good. Sometimes they weren't, crazy brawls, but sometimes they were, really technical and a point that it was, fun to watch. Let's get started. Tarek, the sponge Saffiedine, beat Nate the Great Marquardt by unanimous decision, become the new and final Strikeforce welterweight champion. This is really interesting because he lost to Tyron Woodley. It's something that Milicic pointed out. Marquardt beat Woodley. Woodley beat Saffiedine, but Saffiedine beat Marquardt. And even then when he used that term too, Woodley, if you watch the fight, it's Woodley mainly grinding and controlling Saffiedine, but Marquardt was able to reverse the wrestling and beat Woodley on the stand-up, but he can't beat Saffiedine in the stand-up. But he can't take Saffiedine down. So that's the thing. It just really goes to show that MMA math really doesn't work here. But yeah, the story of the fight were the leg kicks, of course. This was pretty much Jose Aldo, Uriah Faber right here. He just leg kicked him. And what's cool is he baited him. He rope-a-doped him. He would walk up to him, cover up, Marquardt would throw a punch, and Saffiedine would quickly counter with a leg kick. And he kept doing that, and he used a lot of the same combo, just jab, leg kick all the time, and it was so effective. Defended his takedowns, was awesome in the clinch too. He really peeled away from the cage as well. You can really see the Team Quest training there. Marquardt got him down, but he got right back up, and at the end of the fifth round, Saffiedine got Marquardt down. So it's masterful performance, great fight IQ, great defense. I'm always a fan of defense in MMA because defense opens up offense. That's the thing, and that's exactly what happened in this fight. Saffiedine's defense opened up, offensive possibilities. I think both these guys are going to go to the UFC. Really, a lot of people want to see Saffiedine fight the winner of Colors Condit versus Roy McDonald, actually, which I think is a good fight. If you beat Nate Marquardt, or maybe Martin Kampmann, Tarek Saffiedine would be good too. But you beat Marquardt, it's kind of like you can't really. You're gonna go to the top. You can't just fight mid tiers now because you beat a really good guy here. And Marquardt should probably get the loser of like Condit versus McDonald. But yeah, I was really impressed with Saffiedine. I hate to like backtrack, but I've always thought he was a really good prospect. I didn't think he'd beat Marquardt. But just great fight IQ, really good technique. Just on a technical level, Saffiedine's really good. Good fight IQ. He moves well. Didn't gas. I think one of his biggest problems is he always fights at the same pace. So, you gotta really break Saffiedine's rhythm. The only problem is it's really hard to get around the guy's defense too. He's hard to take down. He's hard to hit clean. So it's really hard to take this guy out of his rhythm. He doesn't brawl, but you also don't see him throw a lot of power shots as well. You don't see him throw like a lot of hooks or just a lot of you don't see him throw a lot of fight-ending type of strikes. He really is the type of guy that'll pick his opponent apart. And I think he'll be he's gonna be tough for a lot of guys in the UFC. I gotta say, a guy with technical striking, who's really good at defending takedowns, that can get himself off the cage, get back to his feet when he's taken down. I mean, that's just a recipe for just a really tough opponent, So yeah, I'm really curious to see if I'm sure both these guys will get on the assumption that they both get signed to the UFC. I'm very curious to see how he does. Okay, next fight after that, Daniel Cormier beat Dion Sterling in the second round by TKO. Yeah, this is all Cormier. He even beat him up in stand-up, and he took him down pretty much at will. One thing I will say about Cormier, though, that I'm not the biggest fan of is I know he finished the fight on the ground with strikes, but it's and I hate to criticize him because he's really good, and I want to see him fight Frank Mir. I want to see him fight John Jones. Is his ability to finish on the ground. I mean, it really is. He has a ground and pound, but I think he could have got rear naked chokes. He was actually setting up arm bars, but I don't know if he just wasn't confident in it or what. It didn't want to lose position, but there are a lot of submissions available that he just really didn't commit to. I mean, he still won, so it's not the worst thing in the world, but it'll definitely help him. You know what I mean? You never see him. A lot of wrestlers don't go for hooks. He's one of them. But it's still a great performance, and I really want to see how Cormier does against the top guys in the UFC. He wants to fight Frank Mir in April, and he says he wants to beat up John Jones in the fall. So, I really want to see the Jones fight. I think he'll. Well, one thing that's also really interesting about Cormier is he weighed in at 230 pounds, which indicates to me, because I've seen him go up to the 240s. So that indicates to me that he is progressively losing weight for a 205-pound run. And he's really good as a heavyweight. I think, he could be really good as a light heavyweight as well. He's not a really tall guy. And he quite honestly looks like a blown-up light heavyweight. But with just tremendous skills. His wrestling is just insane. His takedown defense is really good. His striking's really good. He does have good ground and pound. The guy is just... I'm really curious to see how he does against the top of the UFC. I'm going to be honest. If he fights John Jones, I don't think John Jones will be able to take Cormier down. He might be able to beat him up on the feet, but I don't think he's going to take him down. So that's where it gets really interesting. And the other thing with Cormier is he hits really hard too. Just got knocked out Bigfoot. He's just a really solid fight. A really elite fighter. Curious to see how he does in the UFC. Speaking of the UFC, and if a guy goes to the UFC, Josh Barnett beat Nandor Gomino by an arm triangle in the first round. Pretty easy win, took him down, managed to get mount. Gomino gave him the arm triangle pretty much, and Barnett tapped him out. I'm curious to see if Barnett is going to the UFC. In the post-fight interview, he gave a total pro wrestling style promo at the end. He'd be a great addition to the UFC. The guy is a top 10 fighter, really tough chin, and a really good chin, just really scrappy guy. Good, solid stand-up, great catch wrestling, good jiu-jitsu, he makes it hell on people when he's on top, too, when he's on top control. I'd really like to see him fight. Verdun would be a good one, but I really want to see Josh Barnett versus Frank Mir. That fight would be pretty awesome, to be perfectly honest with you. Okay, next right after that, Gegard Mousasi beat Mike Kyle by rear naked choke in the first round. Great performance by Gegard Mousasi here. Kyle, he was throwing. One thing I really liked about Mousasi was his head movement. That guy was just slipping, slipping punches. He'd counter with his own. One story of this fight that's really interesting, and it goes with Saffiedine versus Marquardt, is that Mousasi looked significantly smaller, or not significantly, but noticeably smaller than Mike Kyle, and still won. Same with Saffiedine. Saffiedine, he looks smaller than Marquardt, but he still won the fight. One thing with Mousasi I really liked is he seemed to really put it all together. It was striking, he took him down, went to dominant position, got some really good ground and pound, and finished with a rear naked choke. The ref didn't see him tapping with his left hand, and so Kyle was resigned to tap with his right hand. I really hope to see Gegard Mousasi in the UFC. I really hope he joins a good camp too. He's admitted in the past that he doesn't train as hard as he needs to. He has it all. He has good takedown ability. He has strong Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, good ground and pound, and solid technical stand-up. He definitely has the whole package. He doesn't cut a lot of weight for 205. He looks like a small 205er. And it would be interesting to see him go back down to middleweight. It's not to say he can't be competitive at 205. To be honest, there's a lot of good fights I'd like to see him. Against the best Shogun, I would have liked to see Mousasi. Who else? Maybe a guy like a Thiago Silva. I'm worried about guys that might want to just take him down all day, though. But I'm thinking of guys that might want to stand with him, Lo Nogueira. Who else? Mousasi versus Glover Teixeira. That'd be pretty cool. I want to say Mousasi versus Gustafsson. The size difference is interesting, but Musasi's really technical too. There's a lot of interesting fights for Mousasi. I really hope he gets signed to the UFC. And finally, there's Ronaldo Jacare Souza beat Ed Herman by Kimura in the first round. Great win by Souza, and this really kind of gets you an idea of where that he would be an elite fighter in the UFC. He beat Herman in the stand-up. He took him down, and he beat him in the jiu-jitsu. He beat him everywhere, pretty much. And won by Kimura, no less, because you're seeing You see a lot less Camaros these days. In middleweight, you can get him like a Costa Philippou. Who else is around? Give him like even a Kami, because what's kind of cool with Jacare is like you can't grind with this guy. You take him down and you're into his world now. You can't grind on this guy. So someone like that, Okami would work. Well, Okami's fighting Hector Lombard, so like the winner of that fight would be cool. I said Philippou because Philippou beat Boach. Maybe even like a Munoz, that'd be kind of cool. I would say like Husamar Palhares just because like of the ground battle that it could be. I think Jacare would beat him in the stand-up though. So there's a lot of good fights for Jacare, and he's going to be a really interesting addition to the UFC. I know he signed a new contract with Forza, so I think he's pretty much in. With Herman, he's just back to the mid-tier purgatory in the UFC, pretty much. Okay, on to the prelims. Ryan Couture, according to the judges, beat KJ Nunes by split decision. The funny thing with this split decision too is 29-28. Two judges gave to Ryan Couture. The other judge gave KJ Nunes 30-27. So whoever that judge was knew his MMA pretty much. I mean, the second round is undoubtedly KJ Nunes. One thing about Ryan Couture is he's punching a lot of air. He would hit a leg kick. Nunes would counter with a strong right hand. I mean, the harder hits definitely were from KJ Nunes, and Ryan Couture couldn't take him down either. And every time Ryan Couture went in to shoot him for a takedown, he got uppercutted. I mean, he showed a really good chin, but otherwise, definitely a robbery. There's some fights that's like, I know there's the whole idea of you can make the case for Ryan Couture winning this fight, and I suppose you can, but for the most part, I mean, Nunes just beat him up on the feet and defended the takedowns. I mean, that's pretty much how this fight went. I hope to see Ryan Couture's probably going to go to the UFC just because he's Ryan Couture. Ryan Couture's son, he has some name there. He's not the problem is he's not a terrible fighter or anything like that, but he's definitely like a lower tier fighter. Stand-up's alright. His takedown ability is just alright. I mean, he really rushed in to get taken down, to get takedowns, and he got uppercutted for his efforts. And I hope KJ Nunes really I hope he gets signed to the UFC. There's some really fun fights for him. Jeremy Stevens. I can give him Sam Stout. Sean McDessie. I think he beat Eve Edwards already. Tony Ferguson. Who else likes to strike? Just whoever likes to strike. Give him KJ Nunes. KJ's really fun to watch, and in my opinion, got fight of the night. Okay, next one after that, Tim Kennedy beat Trevor Smith by a guillotine choke in the third round. I really liked this fight. This was a really technical fight. There was some really technical grappling done in this fight, and a lot of good scrambling. One guy with the other takedown, he'd scramble back to his feet. Trevor Smith, once again, looked a lot bigger than Tim Kennedy. Didn't matter though. Tim Kennedy managed to get the guillotine choke, and a really nice scramble too. Once again, it's this whole idea of there's definitely a chess match aspect to it. Even Miletich caught on to that. It's he's kind of letting him single leg Trevor Smith's. Kennedy's letting Trevor Smith single leg him because he gets on top and he gets to land some ground and pound, Kennedy recently didn't have the nicest word, I forgot what the interview was, but he did kind of criticize Sean Shelby and Joe Silva. I'm sure he's going to get to the UFC. He's definitely a UFC caliber fighter. I think he can, he'd be a top, he'd be like 11 to 15. He's a kind of a grinder type of fighter. His stand-up's decent, but definitely gonna be the type of guy that his opponent would have to work all 15 to 25 minutes if it's a 5-round fight against Kennedy. So, good win for Kennedy, and I thought that was a really slick guillotine choke, actually. If he gets to the UFC, he can fight like some more towards the mid-tier of the division, more like your Fukudas or your Nick Rings before, going up the ladder. Next right after that, Pat Healy beat Kurt Hollabaugh by unanimous decision. I gotta give it to Kurt Hollabaugh. Apparently he fights at 145, man. But this guy was he took an opportunity and he lost, but he looked good in losing, Great stuff from Hollabaugh. He did well on the feet. He'd kind of brawl in a way. And when the fight hit the ground, he'd scramble. He's really offensive. He's always moving. Didn't seem to gas out too. Took the fight on short notice, But Pat Healy, superior wrestling game, good top control, They had some really interesting positions, like crucifixes and whatnot, like crucifix-like positions and just weird positions I haven't seen on the ground. Hollabaugh, though, he'd go for like arm bars from his back or like ill-advised arm bars and stuff and pay for it. So you can definitely see that his inexperience. Quite honestly, I'd like to see Hollabaugh in the UFC. I hope he gets signed. I hope Pat Healy gets signed. I'm sure he will. I think he'd be a solid gatekeeper type of fighter. Once again, that type of guy. He makes fights really ugly. You'd have to work the whole 15 minutes against Pat Healy. Okay, and Hoger Gracie beat Anthony Smith by arm triangle in the second round. It's a bit worried for Hoger Gracie here, actually, because Anthony Smith beat him in the stand-up in the first round. Once Hoger got him to the ground, it was over, Just really, really technical, He'd take him down, pass him out, snuck in the arm triangle, and it was over. Good, just great jiu-jitsu from Gracie. Stand-up has a lot to be desired. But he's training with the right guys. And I don't know if he'll ever be a stand-up threat or anything, but, I'd like to see how he does in the UFC. He still needs a lot of work, though. I think he can submit a couple of the lower-end guys in the UFC. And he's really tall. He's like 6'4", Anthony Smith himself is 6'2". Yeah, so good one from Hoger Gracie. And two fights I didn't see. Adriano Martins beat George Gurgel by unanimous decision. Hopefully Martins gets signed to the UFC. I read some stories about this guy. He seems like a good guy. Gurgel's on I don't know. I think he's on a losing streak now, like 3 or 4 fights or something now. And finally, Esteban Payan beat Michael Bravo by TKO in the second round. Didn't get to see the fight, so don't know what happens here. Maybe Payan gets signed to the UFC, though, I think he won his last fight in Strikeforce, so yeah. Okay, let's just talk about Strikeforce itself, then. I was reading MMA Fighting, and there's an article about Strikeforce from Dave Meltzer. Just really talking about how it started, as a kickboxing promotion. I really didn't know its impact upon mixed martial arts at all, and really making like San Jose kind of like a fighting town, more or less. The impact of Frank Shamrock to Strikeforce. He was like the big star. He can promote a fight, and just how they managed to get so many good fighters from, that area, San Jose, the Bay Area. Guys like Gilbert Melendez, the Diaz brothers, Kung Lee. So, it was, it's really interesting. It was a really interesting read. And really, yeah, I didn't know about their history and just how, like, they were selling out, like, the HP Pavilion. Like with Shamrock versus Cesar Gracie, which is, they really built that up, that feud up. I remember watching Shamrock versus Kung Lee. I would love watching that fight. That's really cool. Then, you had Cesar Gracie, who got knocked out by Frank Shamrock. His protege, Nick Diaz, fights Shamrock. And Nick Diaz beats, Frank Shamrock. So, it's... there's definitely some history with the promotion. And how they during that time, I think AKA was coming up. And they managed to get a lot of fighters. I think one of Cain Velasquez's first fights was in Strikeforce. They couldn't book him any more fights because everyone would pull out of fights against him or not want to fight him. So, it's it's a really interesting history. I don't think any other MMA promotion can really replicate what Strikeforce did, simply because most of the best fighters are now being snatched up by the UFC or Bellator, and you're not getting a certain area where, like, just a bunch of good fighters are around. It's not like, you're in, like, New Jersey, there's a promotion in New Jersey that's just getting a bunch of just hot prospects and whatnot, that aren't snatched up right away by the UFC and Bellator. Other things to come from Strikeforce, the 3 losses in a row by Fedor. This guy, he beats Brett Rogers, and in his next 3 fights, he loses, all definitively, too. Really, it's where Fedor pretty much just lost his mystique and aura. So yeah, it's really interesting to see that happen in Strikeforce, and it's part of their story, how they got Fedor, and it's kind of it's really sad to watch. This guy, I love Fedor, and it's sad to see him lose like that. I also like Strikeforce because I think no matter how thin the roster got, they really tried to do the best with what they had in the roster. They put fun fights too. Herschel Walker would be on here, or like they would do KJ Nance versus Nick Diaz too, even though they're in 2 different weight classes. Melvin Manouf versus Robbie Lawler. They get guys from Dream. Whether it's Kawajiri or Shinya Aoki. The matchmaking isn't great sometimes, but sometimes you can't blame him. Yeah, Josh Barnett versus Nandor Gomino, mismatch. Daniel Cormier, Deion Sterling, mismatch. Well, guess what? They don't have any other heavyweights, so they do the best that they can with who they have. And that's why I always appreciate, a lot of people want to bring down Strikeforce. Like, people don't really, some guys don't deserve getting a title. They have, like, 1 win in Strikeforce and they get a title shot. It's like, well, what are you going to do? Some weight divisions have, like 10, 7 to 10 fighters at best, and 3 of them are, like, good UFC caliber fighters. So, I always thought, like, no matter what happens, they put on fun fights. Really entertaining fights. Sometimes mismatches, but then again, it's not really their fault in a sense because the roster's so thin. They can't do anything about it. But yeah, you know. Other things, Scott Smith comebacks, you know, whether it's against like Benji Raddick or Kung Lee. And the other story, and one thing that kind of disappointed me with this final Strikeforce though, is that there wasn't a women's fight on it, actually. Because women's MMA, the biggest platform up until this point, obviously they're going to UFC now, was Strikeforce. And if it wasn't for Strikeforce, it wouldn't really, you know, Ronda Rousey probably wouldn't have a platform as big as Strikeforce to eventually get into the UFC and pretty much take women's MMA into the UFC. I mean, you had your stars in Gina Carano, the big fight with Carano versus Cyborg winning, but then like she'd funny fight sporadically, and Ronda Rousey just totally came up. There's some really good women's fights too. I mean, there's like Sarah Kaufman versus Alexis Davis, Julie Kedzie versus Miesha Tate, Marlos Kunin versus Liz Carmouche. What else? Yeah, so I mean, but they had some good, you know, they really helped women's MMA, and now it's in the UFC, and part of that's because of Strikeforce. So yeah, man, you know, sucks that they're going. It's bittersweet for me, but it is time for them to go. It's time for these guys to move into the UFC as well. As you can tell, you know, a lot of these guys are UFC quality fighters, and not just that, they're elite fighters as well. So yeah, that's pretty much it for my Strikeforce Marquardt versus Saffiedine post-fight analysis. If you have any comments, just leave them below. And that's it for MMA for you. Thank you guys very much.